It's Monday. It's the 23rd of June. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is Arirang News live from Seoul. Our top stories today. It's been a day since a tense shootout at an outpost near the inter-Korean border. Now, troops cornered the runaway Korean soldier who killed 5 comrades and are trying to persuade him to surrender. South Korea's foreign ministry summons the Japanese ambassador to Seoul to lodge a strong protest against Tokyo's review of its 1993 statement acknowledging the military's wartime sexual enslavement of women. Another thrilling day of World Cup action on day 11 of the games. Belgium defeats Russia, Portugal and the U.S. draw, and Algeria overpowers Korea 4-2 in disappointing news for hundreds of thousands of Koreans who stayed up late into the night to root for the national team. We'll have those stories and more. But first, a conscript soldier who killed 5 of his comrades this past weekend remains holed up near the inter-Korean border, surrounded by authorities. Officials at the Defense Ministry say it's just a matter of time before the 22-year-old surrenders. Authorities plan to capture him alive so that they can find out what, in fact, made him go on the rampage. Our Kim Ji-yeon starts us off.
A conscript soldier who killed 5 comrades in a grenade and gun attack over the weekend is on the verge of surrendering, according to the Defense Ministry, which says its first priority is to capture the soldier alive. Authorities successfully made contact with a 22-year-old fugitive soldier at around 8 a.m. this morning and tossed him a cell phone after he asked to talk with his father. The parents are reportedly trying to persuade their son to surrender peacefully. The fugitive soldier, identified only by his surname name, is currently hiding near a school some 10 kilometers from the military base, where he opened fire on troops over the weekend. He fled to the area before being cornered by the military, and the two sides exchanged fire, injuring one. The area is under lockdown and nearby residents have been evacuated. The motive for the initial shooting remains unknown, but Army sources say IM's actions were likely premeditated and targeted specific individuals. IM fired off 10 rounds and threw a grenade in the attack, leaving behind 5 dead and 8 others injured. IM was on the list of soldiers that needed special attention as he struggled adapting to military life. He had just 3 months left before he was scheduled to be discharged. The attack is the latest in a series carried out by Korean soldiers. 8 were killed back in 2005 after a soldier went rogue at his military base, and a similar incident on Gangwon Island in 2011 left 4 dead. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, following Japan's release of a review of its landmark apology on wartime sexual enslavement, the Korean government summoned the Japanese ambassador to Seoul this afternoon. Now, when he arrives, Seoul is expected to lodge a formal complaint over Tokyo's latest move. Arirang News Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
With the relationship between Korea and Japan growing increasingly frosty over historical issues, Seoul summoned the Japanese ambassador on Monday. It comes in response to Tokyo's announcement last week of its re-examination into the Kono statement. The Abe administration, while upholding the statement, controversially claimed that the Korean government was in close consultation with Japan when the statement was being drawn up. The Kono statement was issued back in 1993 by then-Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono. It acknowledged for the first time the forced sexual enslavement of some 200,000 women by the Japanese military during the Second World War. In addition to calling in Japanese Ambassador Koro to complain about the move out of Tokyo, the Korean government plans to register historical records regarding the so-called comfort women with UNESCO and bring up the issue during United Nations meetings. Korea's foreign ministry made a tentative conclusion on Sunday that the Japanese review was trying to diminish the testimonies of sexual slavery victims and the apologetic tone of the Kono statement. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The troubled U.S. Homeland Missile Defense Program, heavily criticized for its unreliability, has finally carried out a successful test. The system, deployed 10 years ago by former President George W. Bush, is supposed to counter the long-range missile threat posed by North Korea. Our Shin Se-min explains.
The U.S. missile defense system on Sunday struck down a simulated enemy missile over the Pacific in the first successful intercept test of the program since 2008. This will help validate the troubled Boeing-run ground-based mid-course defense system, which provides the sole U.S. defense against long-range ballistic missiles. Missile Defense Agency Director Vice Admiral James Saring called it a very important step in Washington's continuing efforts to improve and increase the reliability of the defense system. The Pentagon also said all components involved in the test performed as planned, and the officials will be assessing the performance of the system with the data collected from the test. The system had failed to hit dummy missiles in previous tests since the Bush administration deployed the system in 2004 to counter the threat posed by North Korea. It was reported on Friday that the Pentagon had restructured its contract with Boeing to put more emphasis on maintenance and reliability. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Strategic patience, that's the key U.S. policy on North Korea. But while the United States patiently waits for the North to show its sincerity about denuclearizing, the regime is engaging in a diplomacy of its own, cozying up with Japan and Russia. Should Washington take a fresh approach on Pyongyang? Well, our Hwang Sang-hee posed that very question to Frank Januzzi. Januzzi worked as Asia policy advisor for the Obama campaign in 2008 and is now serving as president of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation.
The most important thing is that North Korea continues to develop their nuclear capacity, and as long as the United States remains sidelined, I see no likelihood that that's going to change. Maybe putting people ahead of plutonium, focusing on some of the people-to-people interactions, which could address some of the pressing human rights concerns in North Korea, but also perhaps begin to create some greater enthusiasm inside North Korea among the elite for renegotiating the terms of their current path, their current commitment to nuclear weapons.
You just mentioned people over plutonium approach. What do you mean exactly by that?
So I think the United States and other parties to the six-party talks need to focus on building a constituency inside North Korea for change. It means even if you keep sanctions, doing things like family reunification visits, cultural exchanges, bringing North Korean students out of North Korea, all of these things can help show North Korea that the true path to security does not lie with nuclear weapons.
Really knowing that there is this huge nuclear threat in North Korea and just using the people-to-people approach, wouldn't that be too dangerous?
Well, the situation is dangerous now, and nothing that the six parties are doing is making it any less dangerous. So, admittedly, a people-focused approach will not yield immediate results on the nuclear threat that we face, but neither is the current strategic patience approach yielding anything in terms of a reduction of the threat.
President Xi Jinping will be coming to South Korea next month. Traditionally, Chinese leaders have visited North Korea before coming to South Korea. President Xi isn't doing that. Is this another sign of change in China-North Korea relations?
It's a very important signal by China that China sees the long-term future of the Korean Peninsula being decided more by Seoul than by Pyongyang. And China wants to have that discussion ultimately with South Korea. So I think it's a very good sign for China's recognition of the realities on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, another thrilling day of World Cup action has passed us, with day 11 in Brazil bringing in 2 late goals and a surprise big victory. But it surely wasn't a hopeful day for Team Korea, as its chances of advancing to the next round in the round of 16 dimmed, with the Taeguk Warriors losing 4-2 to Algeria in their second tournament in Group H. Well, in a very disappointing first half, Korea led in 3 very sloppy goals, and despite a spirited second half, they were not able to get back into the match. Well, our sports correspondent Song Ji-sun joins us for her take on Korea's probability of advancing to the next round and the weaknesses that we witnessed in the Korean squad this defeat. So Ji-sun, let me tell you, it was one very disappointing, early morning this morning, and it was. Especially because the content of the game was not very well played out by the Korean team, especially seeing their performance against Russia. We were expecting something more, and we did not see that.
Right. Actually, the Taeguk Warriors put the Korean fans down because their performance in the first half was very poor, and we saw them giving away goal after another in the first half. And in fact, the Algerians gave away perfect goals, and it didn't really seem hard because there were a lot of empty spots all over the defense. Korea lost 2 goals in the space of just 2 minutes after Algeria's Islam Slimani scored the first on 26th minute. Now ending the first half 3-0 down and without a single shot at goal, Korea looked down and out, but there was a few minutes of hope when Son Heung-min pulled a goal back in the 50th minute. But unfortunately, the win was knocked out of Korea's sails 12 minutes later when Algeria made it 4-1. Korea's gov't got a consolation goal in 72 minutes, but that's how it would end, 4-2 to Algeria. The Algerian team brought in 5 fresh faces from their first game, making it harder for the Korean squad to know what to expect. Now, Korea's head coach Hong Myung-bo did not make any changes to his lineup, but striker Park Ju-young, who was off the boil again, has come in for criticism.
Ji-sun, I'm wondering, maybe he should have, maybe Coach Hong Myung-bo should have, rearranged the lineup because, knowing that Algeria is a very different team from the Russians and knowing that the Algerians must have watched Korea's game against Russia and analyzed all the players. So maybe he should have, reshuffled the lineup a little bit, the best of 11. And many are questioning whether that was the best choice on the part of head coach.
I doubt it, actually. And I think he went to play too safe. And given that more than half of the players on his roster was the same from the London Olympics, and he should have utilized more players, especially from the K-League. And the Algerian players were very strong physically. And also note that the Algerian players, a lot of them are dual citizens of French, but they are now Algerian citizens to make it to the national team, and they're more desperate to score than ever.
Right. I mean, it's a game that one of the BBC commentators called it whether it was even qualified as a World Cup level game. So, we were very disappointed on that because knowing that the Koreans can play better than this. So I suppose the big question now is, do we have a chance of making it to the next round?
Well, we cannot say it's impossible at this point because we do have a chance, but it's very, very, very slim at this point. We must beat Belgium in our 3rd match and in a very massive victory, and Algeria must fail to beat Russia. But even in this case, Korea needs a bucketful of goals as we have lost the most goals in the group. We essentially need to beat Belgium, which is a very strong European side, and then hope Russia to do us a favor against Algeria. Belgium is the top seed in Group H with the highest FIFA ranking of 11th, and they have already qualified for the knockout stage. Now, one hopeful note is that the Belgium's coach says he will not put his best 11 against Korea, as he wants to give a chance to other players who have not yet got to play in the World Cup.
Maybe it's a bit of a deal. It deals a blow to the Korean players' pride. But I think at this point, pride is not something that we need to put above us. It's a win. It's a victory, as not only for the players themselves, but for the millions here in Korea rooting and supporting the Korean team.
Exactly. They actually sacrificed their sleep to cheer for their teams, and they went out to streets like they did in the past World Cups, but unfortunately they did not get the victory they wanted to as they cheered on for the Korean squad.
Right, and it wasn't really a doom or gloom game because a lot of Korean supporters on the streets who actually gave up their sleep to support the Korean team says they're still looking for hope in the Korean squad. Our Connie Kim went out on the streets of Seoul to find that out.
Disappointment was written across the faces of the tens of thousands of fans who braved the heavy rain to cheer on Korea in their 2nd World Cup group game against Algeria. Nearly 40,000 people gathered in front of COEX Convention Center, one of the biggest cheering spots in downtown Seoul, to support the Red Devils. Live music performances meant the atmosphere was festive before the match. The happy mood and optimism soon turned to disappointment, however, as Algeria stuck 3 goals past Korea in the first half.
Although Team Korea's first victory didn't come in the match against Algeria on this Monday morning, hopes are high that their win will come in their match against Belgium on Friday morning.
Today's game was a turning point to make it further in the tournament. I thank Son Heung-min and Gu Ja-chul for scoring a goal each. Although we lost today, I support our team and believe we can do well in our next match.
If we play like we did during the second half of this game, I think we have a good chance of beating Belgium on Friday.
The fans said the team's poor defending in the first half cost them in the end.
Our attacking play was pretty good, but we were vulnerable to counterattacks. You never know what can happen in football. I believe we can win against Belgium and qualify for the last 16.
On the day of the big match against Belgium on Friday, the cheers will be heard all the way to Brazil. Fans across the country refuse to give up hope that Korea can go at least one stage further in the World Cup. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
You know, as for sports has a way of really putting people together and uniting a nation as one. So I really do hope that the Korean players could actually, even if not a win, could show Koreans that there is something that we can do very well.
Yeah, and actually it's a matter of possibility because in the last 2 World Cups we had 1 win, 1 loss, and a draw. In neither one of them we advanced the second round, and the other one we didn't. So if we actually win over Belgium, and we could actually wait for Algeria and Russia's result, and we might be able to advance the next round and have another game at the World Cup.
Right, so we're looking to probabilities right now. So now that everyone has played 2 games, right? How is it looking like in other groups?
Well, actually, in some groups we have clearly the results who's going to advance next round, and some teams will have games that will not be really meaningful because they will not make it to the next round. Let's take a look at the group standings as of this Monday, with just 1 match remaining for all the teams. For Group A, Brazil and Mexico are leading, but any country has a shot at advancing to the next round, depending on their final match on this Monday. In Group B, Chile and Netherlands have secured their spots for the round of 16, with their last match today only deciding who will finish top or second in the group. And the window is open for countries in Group C, with just Colombia sure that they will advance to the knockout stage. Moving on to Group D, Italy and Uruguay must fight for the second spot after Costa Rica. And the same story goes for Group E. France is leading the group with Honduras out of the game. Argentina has secured its spot for the round of 16, and Portugal has a shot if they win their final Group G game, and Germany and the US do not play out a draw. In our Group H, Belgium keeps its lead at 2 wins, beating Russia 1-0 earlier Sunday afternoon, with Korea in the last place.
All right, so what are some of the tournaments that we can expect on this Monday?
Well, as we only have the last match, the 2 matches of the final group stage will be held together at the same hour to make it fair for all the teams. Now, starting with Group B, the top 2 and the bottom 2 Group Bs are set for 1 p.m. local time. And we're also definitely seeing the South American teams performing good in Brazil. And will Brazil and Mexico be able to keep Cameroon and Croatia at bay? And we'll know what that result by Tuesday morning, Korea time.
Right, so now we're beginning to have some a choice of which one to watch, I suppose, from this round and on, right? All right, Ji-sun, thank you as always for your comprehensive coverage, and we look forward to having you again.
Pleasure.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-young live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East C and Japanese name C of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. Now, Sunni militants have made some serious headway in Iraq, now capturing 3 of its border crossings in the western frontier. Now, the border crossings line up with Syria and Jordan, which puts the ISIL militant steps closer to taking over the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. Of course, that was what they were trying to avoid. This is because they now have control of the Abu Kamal Qaim crossing, which also serves as a strategic supply route connecting to eastern Syria, largely in the hands of ISIL militants who want to create an Islamic caliphate there. Also, insurgents firmed their grip over the region by taking 4 more strategically important towns, effectively controlling at least 70% of the Anbar province. And complicating the response to the tensions is Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who came out to strongly oppose U.S. quote, intervention in Iraq. He said the insurgency was led by extremists and remnants of Saddam Hussein's regime and rejected the notion that it was a sectarian war between Shiites and Sunnis. The impact of the leader's statements on a possible Tehran-Washington alliance to defend Baghdad remains to be seen. Now, on a different note, the OECD sees positive things ahead in the coming months for the Korean economy. The organization put Korea's composite leading indicator of economic activity, or CLI, at 101.01 in April. Now, it marks the 15th straight month that the index topped the benchmark 100. The CLI provides an economic outlook for 6 months from now on based on economic data such as industrial activity, GDP, and capital flows. A reading above 100 indicates economic expansion, and the OECD average for April was 100.6. Korea's final figure of 101.01 places it 12th among OECD member nations. And the nation's largest group, Samsung Electronics, remains active in supplying for patents across the world. Thomson Reuters, in its State of Innovation report, says Samsung had the most patent requests last year in both the mobile phone and semiconductor categories. Samsung also asked for the most patents in smart media content. As for other domestic companies, LG Electronics ranked number 5 in the kitchen appliances category, while Hyundai Motor was 4th for patents related to vehicles that run on alternative fuels. Now, more on Korean companies. The U.S. Food and Drug Association has given the green light to a Korean-made drug for the first time in 11 years. Now, Civextro, it's an antibiotic made to treat infections of the superbacteria known as MRSA, was developed by Korean pharmaceutical company gov't, and it marks the second locally developed drug to get the seal of approval from the U.S. agency. gov't expects to pull in annual sales of about $293 million from licensing royalties and technology support from the U.S. producer and distributor of its drug. Now, researchers here in Korea have come up with a way to give robots the sense of touch using artificial screen. This will make them more suitable for physical human interaction. Our Son Jung-in has more on this advancement.
A robot that can feel the sense of touch just like a human. It seems unrealistic, but local researchers have come up with new technology that could equip robotic devices for the future. Korea's Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute recently developed a transparent touch sensor sheet that perceives information from surroundings in real time, such as the amount of pressure, direction, and temperature of touch. Only 50 micrometers thick, it can be bent or rolled without affecting sensor signals it detects, even when force is applied to various spots at the same time, just like when shaking hands with someone.
Upon touch, light scatters on the spot and the panel detects the difference between the input light and the output light.
Thanks to its thin and flexible qualities, the panel is applicable on nearly any surface, which makes it ideal for a wide variety of future uses, most notably in the flexible display market.
This technology will enable us to maneuver robot hands in a very delicate way. It could also be applied to wearable devices for people to operate in an elaborate manner.
The result of its research has led to the filing of 8 related patents and was featured in the scientific journal Advanced Materials. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Well, on to some other sports news apart from the World Cup. Korean-American Michelle Wie has won the U.S. Women's Open, earning her first major championship title. Wie closed with an even par 70 at Pinehurst #2 on Sunday local time for a 2-under 278 total. This put the 24-year-old 2 shots ahead of #1 ranked American Stacey Lewis. Wie turned pro in October 2005, and this marks her first win in a major tournament.
It's been very hot over in Brazil, but temperatures have turned cooler, except in Recife, where rain is expected and temperatures into the high 20s. And as for the weather conditions here in Korea, we can expect some cloudy and foggy day with some sudden rain showers in the central region and Gyeonggi-do province throughout the day. And we are expecting up to 40 millimeters of precipitation across the nation, along with some thunderstorm and hail for some regions. And as the wet day continues, the daytime highs are somewhat cooler, reaching to the mid to high 20s. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 26, and Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 27 and 23 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 24, Dokdo at 21, while Mankumgang tops out at 22. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Ganyang.
And that's just about all from me at this hour. I'm Moon Ganyang. Check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.